The state imposed new requirements for women's health clinics that perform abortions. Some of the new rules require expensive renovations, such as widening the hallways and making new closets. The expense has already forced the closing of one of these small businesses and may lead to more. Where do you stand on the controversial new regulations, and what would you do to either support them or remove them?
Well, thank you so much for the question. And as most of you in the audience know, this is a fight that I have fought for the last 2 years. The social agenda, as I call it, rolled into Virginia 2 years ago, starting with the infamous transvaginal ultrasound mandate that landed us on the late-night comedy shows. We then moved on to the trap laws, which have changed the regulations for women's health clinics. Already 2 of them have been shut down because of that. We then had the miscarriage bill saying that a woman who suffered from a miscarriage would need to report that to the police within 24 hours. You know, how about the woman reporting it to her provider? And then finally the personhood bill. And if it's okay, I want to just take a minute to talk about the personhood bill. The personhood bill would criminalize most forms of oral contraception that are used in the Commonwealth of Virginia today. It would also criminalize in vitro fertilization. As I said earlier, I teach at Eastern Virginia Medical School. It is in vitro fertilization that put that medical school on the map. They have helped thousands of families who have had difficulty conceiving, and I hope that they will continue to be able to help thousands of families in the future. So these pieces of legislation have tremendous consequences. You know, we talked earlier during the debate that, you know, we need to be in a position in Virginia where we're welcoming people to the Commonwealth of Virginia. I talked about the assault on women's reproductive health care. Let me ask you all, what woman in her right mind would want to come to the Commonwealth of Virginia when most forms of contraception have been criminalized and when in vitro fertilization has been criminalized? So, you know, we need to think about that. What are we doing with pieces of legislation like that? So this past year, I introduced legislation to repeal the ultrasound mandate. Talked about earlier is choice, and you talked about choice for education. You know, we need to give women a choice. We as leaders, and we as legislators, most of whom are men, by the way, should not be telling women what they should and shouldn't be doing with their lives.
I was at a meeting at Hampton University talking to a group of students, and this issue came up, and one of them asked me, sort of toward the end, well, now tell us, do you believe that life begins at conception? I thought about it for a second. I said, well, as far as I know, that's when I started. Now, look, I am unabashedly pro-life. I don't make any apologies for that. I will always do everything in my power to persuade others that it is the right thing to do to protect the lives of unborn children.
That's it?
Yes, I'd like to ask about gun violence. Since this is a fiscal debate here, there is a cost to gun violence. Of course, a huge emotional toll on the families and communities, but you know, the cost of people who are gone, who won't be contributing to society anymore, but there's also a cost in the hospitals. The Urban Institute found that in 2010, the firearm assault injury, the injuries cost U.S. hospitals $630 million. What measures would you support to keep weapons out of the hands of those intending to do harm?
Well, I had the privilege of meeting a young man at an auto zone. They were having a rally outside the auto zone because the young man had lost his job because an armed intruder went into the store, took everybody in the store hostage, and had a gun on all of them. The young man was a licensed, legal firearm owner. He walked in, disarmed that assailant, and probably saved the lives of those people. And for that, he lost his job. The reality is, criminals are always going to get guns. They will steal them. They will find them. They will get them somehow. We've got to stop trying to infringe on the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms according to the Second Amendment. For every instance, and it's horrible, it's horrifying, when young people are killed. I mean, is there any human being whose heart is not torn out over that? Of course. I would hope not. If your heart's not torn out over that, you're not human. But for every one of those instances, there are instances where people have prevented violence because a law-abiding citizen had a firearm in order to stop the bad guy who was trying to kill others. So we have guns in our culture. Bad people get them. We have got to focus on making sure that the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens are protected. I take the Founding Fathers seriously when they said the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I think that's what we need to focus on.
Check.
Well, as I said earlier, I think we need to sit down at the table and have a discussion and agree that gun violence is a problem here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We look at the number of homicides that we have now in our urban areas, in our cities. We look at the number of suicides, just the number of veterans who have returned, who have access to guns, no access to mental health. There are a lot of things that we need to do to decrease the gun violence in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I just want to back up just a second, and as was said in the introduction, I wear a hat in Hampton Roads. I'm the medical director of Edmark Hospice. That's a pediatric hospice. It's actually the only pediatric hospice in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And voluntarily, I oversee the care of about 60 terminally ill children at any one given time. That has helped put my life in perspective. There is nothing, I don't think, in this world more difficult than the loss of a child. I have never had that happen, thankfully. But, again, I go back to the Sandy Hook. Just think about that. Children getting massacred by a crazed person that goes in with a high-volume military-style assault weapon. Think of what happened at Virginia Tech. Think of what happened in Washington last week. We as a society have to have a discussion on how we can prevent that from happening. For us, again, I told you that I've had the pleasure of meeting these Virginia Tech families. Once you talk to someone who has lost a child in a setting like that, you can't turn your back to them. At the end of the day, we need to be able to put our children on the school bus, let them go to school, be educated, and return home to us safely. That's what we as a society need to concentrate on. That's why we need to address gun violence in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you about transportation. After nearly 3 decades, as you have brought up, the legislature, the governor passed, signed into law, new transportation funding. What should the next steps be, and how should that new transportation money be allocated?
Well, that's a great question, Peggy. And, I have been in the legislature for 6 years, and each year we have talked about the importance of dealing with transportation and infrastructure in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Our roads have gotten more congested. I'm preaching to the choir right here up in Northern Virginia. They have also in Hampton Roads. We sit numerous hours wasting our time, wasting fuel, wasting energy because of our poor transportation system. And, why is it important? Well, it's important for quality of life. We need to be able to get from point A to point B. It'd be nice to go see our children's sporting events or their play or whatever. It's also important for safety reasons. God forbid if we ever had to evacuate up here or Hampton Roads, it would be a long day. But most importantly, it's an economic driver for the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have a very strong military presence here in Virginia. They put us on notice. By the way, 47% of our economy in Hampton Roads is related to the military. They put us on notice, if you don't do something about transportation and infrastructure, we're going to find other places to moor our ships. Another good example is our ports. I know that the ports are in Hampton Roads, but that is about 10% of our economy in the Commonwealth of Virginia. They need to get their goods in and out of the ports of Virginia, and I can tell you there is a narrow margin of profitability in that business. If we don't take care of it, if we didn't take care of it this past year, then they will find other ports to go to. Just down to the south of us, Savannah and Charleston. They're not playing for second. So that is why transportation was so important. This was a bipartisan bill that was put on the table by Governor McDonald, supported by Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling. Republicans and Democrats came together and said, this is the year that we need to do something to address transportation. It puts new revenue on the table that we have not had since 1986, when then Governor Belials was in office. So the question was, where do we go now? Well, what we need to do now as leaders is make sure that that funding is spent responsibly. We need to look at the priorities that are